the Insta podcast. Here on the Insta podcast, we strive to inspire everyone to choose the food that brings the good, as well as to dive into the nutrition and dietetics community to know more about it. I'm the host of the day, I'm Shin, and my partner here, Amin.
Hello everyone, I'm Min.
With such great pleasure, we have a final year dietetic students with us today. We will be sharing the third and final year experience and give us some tips and tricks to overcome the upcoming challenges. Hello, Kah Yen.
Hi guys. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for accepting our invite.
Moving on, let's jump into year 4, the final year. I'm sure this is the year most people looking forward to, and I'm one of it. So curious about how I can make money from my degree, but just kidding. It's seriously, we need to face the reality after we graduate from school. So, okay, from now, may I know, have you completed all the placement, the community, food service, clinical, or is it still going on?
For me right now, I've only completed 2 out of 3 of those. So I've completed my food service and also community. And clinical, I wouldn't say I've started yet, but we are still like sort of that pre-clinical training phase. So, it's like sort of 1/4.
Not yet on site, right? It's just online.
Yeah, not yet on site, just online. And we went to IMU that day, but that's the most.
Could you briefly share with us what you do as a food service dietetics intern?
Okay, so food service, I would say it depends on where you guys go. It's different for all hospitals, but for me, I actually got to intern at the KPJ Ampang Putri Specialist Hospital. So I don't know if anyone from there will listen to this thing, but shout out to you guys, I guess. So for me, I guess I was very fortunate to actually be placed on site. So I get to go into the kitchen and I get to experience how everything essentially runs within a hospital kitchen itself. And I would say my daily task depended on which station or section of the department I was assigned to. So for KPJ itself, we actually have 4, which is the kitchen, the store, diet aid, and also food service. And it really depends on what they require me from that day, and then I'll perform as I'm required to do so. So if we talk about the store, my job mainly just involves, like inventory counting, like checking if everything is there. If it's not, then I'll probably have to write it down on like the card, and also labeling when we do get new items, such as like their expiry date and also when they were received, so that just for the kitchen staff who are taking things from the store itself to know when like they can still use it and when they have to stop using it, because we don't want like any food safety issues happening within the hospital itself. Besides that, I also like help when it comes to like delivery of products. I help to check with like the amount, the weight before actually transferring them to the storage itself. And this is when we talk about like product specifications, which I'm sure you guys have or will learn in your food service modules itself. So that's one section. The next one would be kitchen, which I mostly help with raw ingredient preparation. And this is the whole thing of like, cutting vegetables. If the chef allows you to cook like a certain dish, you can definitely help and learn from them as well. And I think this is something that maybe not a lot of people will think about. They're like, oh, I'm learning dietetics. Why do I need to go into the kitchen and cut vegetables? But very surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, you can learn a lot from just the way they do things, whether it's an increasing efficiency within the kitchen, which you can definitely use if you become a food service dietitian to help your staff and improve their efficiency. Or I remembered certain things that I didn't learn in my module, and the chef would tell me like, it's good to soak your vegetables before actually cooking them because it helps to retain the crunchiness. So I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I'll search up on that. And I think that itself could be something that is very helpful, especially when you talk about designing a dish that meets certain texture modifications and things like that. That's something I think I've learned from them, and obviously I appreciate a lot. So that's one. With this to add on with like the kitchen itself, when you are in the kitchen, obviously your knowledge on all those food safety like standards, policies like those HACCP, you kind of put them into play, and also you kind of see how it actually applies. Because when you learn, you're just like, oh, don't do this, common sense. But when you get to the kitchen, you kind of realize like, when you're doing it, sometimes you forget things. And this is where like you learn how to really be more like, like those detectives, like check everything and make sure everything is where they need to be so that, no one gets poisoned and also everything is running smoothly. So that's the second section. For my third section, it's actually food service. So food service is basically delivering meals to the patient and also collecting once they are done. And we have like specific schedule that we are assigned to do so. So it would be like, I think breakfast, lunch, and then tea time, and also dinner. So that's the main meals and also that snack in between. And then lastly is diet aid. So diet aid is really dependent on whether you like paperwork, because for diet aid, a lot of your work essentially evolves around ticking participants' menu. For KPJ itself, in certain cases where we talk about like COVID patients, you can't give them the menu because you can't have that contact with them. It's very dangerous and it's not safe. So what the dietary department did was that they actually take the options for the patient itself, depending on sometimes the condition, whether they're diabetic or whether they need high salt or low salt. Not high salt. There's no such thing as high salt. My bad. High protein, low protein, low salt, and etc. So that's one thing. And from there, you will collect all the menus itself, and you have like this big production sheet. And from there, we just kind of tick off all the stuff like rice, how many portions, and from there we send it to the kitchen so that they can prepare the adequate amount to fulfill all the patient that is in the hospital at that point of time. Lastly, with the diet aid is that you can actually have access to some of the enteral nutrition products. So, like tube feeding and all those things. For KPJ itself, they actually stored it within a cupboard. So for me, because I had to help them, kind of like check their stocks and everything in the diet aid room, I kind of allowed myself to really use that opportunity and just familiarize myself with anything and everything that it has.
I always thought like food service part is still more of office work. Then I never thought it's like you need to go into the kitchen, even though like store, check all the store things and order the menu, all those things.
Yeah, I would say for interns, it's definitely a different story as compared to a dietitian. I'm pretty sure you guys know who Paul Mary is, right? Like, so for her, she likes to say like how the kitchen is a battlefield. Maybe when, if you decide to become a food service dietitian, you probably won't do all the things that I've said just now because that's not your job scope. But it's definitely good to know all these different departments and how they work so that if I do become like a food service dietitian, then I know what is expected and I know how to sort of handle certain things that's happening within each of these sections. Because if I just go in with my dietetics knowledge, I probably won't know how to go about the kitchen or go about the diet aid or even like store checking, because my knowledge is mostly focused on managing like the HACCP and all those things.
Yeah, it's great how you got exposed to the whole process of it, from like the flow, taking the orders, everything.
Yeah, we learn the things all in the slide, quality control, HACCP. We just know from the slide, then we test.
Yeah, we just know from the slide.
How the process are step 1, step 2, but we are in the on-site and hands-on. We're not sure what we're going to do, So just like the case you mentioned just now.
Yeah, must have been so cool. Because every time we're in lecture, and then the doctors would just be like explaining everything, and we're just like, oh yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it just makes sense, but to see it really happen, that would be pretty cool.
You can interact with a lot of like the food service staff, which I think is another added bonus, because I feel like when you had like 4 years of degree life interacting with your like classmates and everything, you kind of know how everyone is, and because everyone has that like that background in like dietetics or like that background in like science, it's definitely very different from like kitchen staff, because some of them like they only have like secondary education, but even then you learn so much from them, which is something I personally took from like my food service internship itself, is that no matter who that person is, you can always learn something from them.
Moving on, from what you've previously told us, you're doing your community placement at the Beautiful Gates Foundation for Disabled and Diet Ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. For the background information, Beautiful Gate Foundation for Disabled is a local nonprofit organization established in 1993 committed to serve people with disabilities. And they're basically focused on providing various services to meet the different needs of the community. Okay, so tell us more about what you have done in the BGF community placement.
Okay, so for BGF itself, our whole placement was focused on presenting and executing a webinar for the BGF community itself. So for me, I was actually the secretary. So obviously, like I had to organize and minute all the meetings. But besides that, like with the group itself, we also try to do a lot of background work in understanding our community itself, their learning disabilities, any language barriers or language preference they may have. Generally, learning what would make the session a little bit more helpful for them to take on, so that when they leave the webinar, they'll know that, I've actually learned something as compared to when I first started the webinar. So that's one thing. And for us, we actually did a lot of supplementary work as well. And when I say supplementary work, I meant, we prepared nutrition education materials, such as like post-webinar pamphlets, so that at least they can have something to bring with them after the webinar to kind of refresh their memory if they need to. And because during our 4 weeks preparation before we started our placements, we actually created like this micro video. And so we kind of just, fix the micro video up a little bit, and then we give them that as well, so that if they wanted to play within the center itself, they can. Yeah, I think that's about all I did in BGF.
Wow. So the other community placement was Diet Ideas, which was the first consultancy company that provided online MNT consultation. So MNT stands for Medical Nutrition Therapy. And basically, Diet Ideas aims to incorporate a new dimension of healthy eating patterns in the society. So would you like to tell us more about what MNT is? Because I'm pretty sure our juniors haven't touched on this subject yet.
I would say it sounds kind of scary to some people, but it's basically evidence approach nutrition to treating and managing diseases, and this could be preventing, that helps as well, and also treating complications that the patients may have. So when we talk about evidence-based, obviously it's backed by years and years of research. And it, like I mentioned, like at the very start of the podcast, like the up-to-date thing is something that is very much incorporated within medical nutrition therapy itself. So that's basically the basis of what medical nutrition therapy is. It's something that only dietitians can do. That's a very important point. People always say like, what's so special about dietitians?
Okay. So what was the main job scope as a dietetics intern in the community placement?
So for Diet Ideas, the whole placement, I would say, was actually focused on online diet consultation. So for me and my group mates, we actually had this Kedahan client who was actually seeking to gain weight. We had like these 3 sessions with her where each of us kind of took over each section to help her, either fix her knowledge on certain things, any knowledge deficit she has on her diet, or just helping prescribe some interventions to help her gain the weight. And to supplement all these things, we actually prepared a 3-day meal plan for her, kind of incorporating any foods that works for her, some foods that she actually do consume, while also including other things that maybe she don't usually eat, but it's something that she can definitely incorporate within her diet that's also, very importantly, available in her surroundings, because we can't be recommending her food from Malacca if she's in Kedah. That's the important point here. So I would say that whole experience itself, I think, kind of gave me that motivation to really feel like I can actually be a good dietitian, because at the end of that whole 3-session program with the client, she actually gained like 0.7 kg, which may not be very significant when we think about it, but for someone like her who said that she has not been able to gain weight for like the past few years, I would say it's definitely a success, because it shows that she was committed to the program itself, and it showed that any interventions that we've given her, it has actually worked. And besides that, there were a few other things which were not really related to online diet consultation itself, but it's something that I personally found very helpful, which was nutrition article writing. This is the main thing that helped me initiate Instagram page, because I essentially had to research on a lot of things. And from there, I realized how much information was out there and how some of these informations are not the most legit things. So that itself kind of helped me grasp like how important we as dietitians are. And at the same time, we also had this commercial product market survey thing where our assignment essentially revolved around like going to the supermarket, taking pictures of like different nutrition labels of different products, and then just compiling them and seeing like what is in common. So if we talk about, let's say, like chocolate bars, after like collecting everything, I realized that, oh, hey, they're different, but they all essentially have like almost like the same calories. So that itself can help any of you guys, that if you guys are listening, when you do like diet consultation and you have to write the calories of all like what your patients is eating, if you already know these things, then it's definitely something that is going to make your whole session more efficient. And last but not least, we also had like something similar to PBLs, which is where we were given like specific topics that we had to research. And then after researching them, we have this discussion with the local preceptor. And from there, we presented anything and everything that we know about from our research. And the local preceptor in return will just give some input from his experience with the community itself, and also any prior experience he had before doing community.
Wow. It sounds like you learned a lot. Like you practice a lot of what we are currently learning in Sem 4 in your placement, because we're currently learning about menu planning, like identify your client, determining the calories, and then cutting it down to the macronutrients, like, and then catering to their ethnicity, race, resources, and everything. Yeah, so it's really cool to like hear you say it, because I was just listening to the class the other day.
How do you feel about the coming clinical placement?
I think obviously first thing is very nervous. I think because it's a new environment. I've been in a hospital for my food service, but I've not been in the clinical setting. So I know within myself that I'm going to need some time to adapt myself to how everything's going, the fast-paced lifestyle that is expected of us as interns. But despite being nervous and all these like negativity, I also feel like kind of excited because, I finally get to step into that one thing that I think I've been looking forward to all this time, getting to meet patients and also just learning from different people as well, because we're going to be, working with nurses, with doctors, our medical friends who are in like Seremban campus itself. So that's where I feel like a lot of the things we learn from lectures and also a lot of things we learn from supplemental reading could really be solidified.
And what are the plans for the clinical placement?
I think that at first I wasn't sure where I wanted to go because I'm a very indecisive person. I can't even choose what I want to eat for dinner, which is, probably very common. But, for clinical itself, I think I'll probably go with the flow and, see what cases I can see. Obviously, I aim to expose myself to as many cases of like patients as possible, just so that I could kind of stack up like my credentials and kind of help me when it goes to working life. But we actually have this like 4-week at the end of our clinical year that is like open to a specialized focused clinical setting. So this is where we actually have the options of going to another hospital that may be specialized in the different things if we want to bulk up our dietetics knowledge just within that specific subset of disease or anything. So for me, I usually have like 2 choices, but I already made up my mind. At first, I had 2 choices, which was diabetes, because it's something very common and yet it's still not, I guess, very properly understood by people. Like you still see a lot of people having diabetes, newly diagnosed, and then they themselves will probably need someone to help them with dietary management part. But at the same time, I was also thinking of chronic kidney disease. And I think just because of my personal experience, because my grandpa had CKD, so I think that kind of made me feel like, oh, I want to know more about CKD. CKD, it sounds like something that's difficult to handle, but I kind of want to build that skill up. So if I do see cases in the future that resemble CKD, where you have to like think about the protein, like the potassium, the phosphate, and all these things, I know how to handle myself when I do see those patients.
Those are the really different like aspects to think about when handling different patients.
Do you experience like anything that is out of your expectation during the internship? And what are your thoughts about it?
For me, I mean, like the way I say, maybe it will sound a bit bad, but I guess I didn't expect the learning environment to be so conducive, because like when we talk about food service, I'm very frankly gonna say I expected to be screamed at. I was like, I'm ready to be screamed at for doing something, like for making any mistakes, because I think maybe it's because I watch a lot of like TV dramas of like
I have
chef
an idiot
scolding people.
sandwich.
Hell kitchen, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, what if someone scream at me like Gordon Ramsay? I'm like, I think I'll break down. So I wouldn't say that will happen, but I kind of, like hope for the best, expect the worst kind of mindset when I went for my internship. But like for me, I would say I'm very lucky to actually have a local preceptor for both like community and food service who were, they were strict in some sense, but they were also very helpful. They understood that we were students and we were there for learning. And I think they really gave us a lot of good tips on what we can do to really grow and be a better dietitian. Because I think as students, one thing we feel sometimes is that, oh, we ask a lot of stupid questions. We do a lot of stupid mistakes. But I would say in my case, despite like having obviously made some mistakes along the way during the internship, we were not berated for it, but instead we were taught on like what the right things were. And I think from that, it just makes me, I guess it really helped me a lot because I feel like, I really had that support system when I went for my internship. I think really they were really very open and really willing to help without just judging me, because I was also expecting the thing of people thinking I'm stupid. So just kind of having them like give me that sense of relief when I go into like my placement so that I could learn without feeling like I am not good enough, I think really has kind of exceeded my expectation as to what I thought it was before this.
Wow, that's good. Good learning environment.
Yeah.
From experience, what other characteristic that we perhaps cannot learn in lecture that you personally think are essential?
I think ultimately it's like effective communication, because the lecture notes, they will say like when talking to patients or like communicating with other people, what you can do, like they list things from A, B, C, like all the way to like Z. And yeah, it does help you, but when it comes to like executing itself, sometimes it can be difficult. Like I said, you forget things in the heat of the moment. Even if you really know them by theory, it may not actually translate into practice sometimes. So I think in my case, it would definitely be like translating or communicating that nutrition information or dietary advice to patients and clients, because what you learn is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But some patients, they cannot take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You need to break it down a bit further because they don't have that scientific background that we may have for certain patients. And I think being able to communicate that to the patient in like this layman, very simple term that still meets their objective is very important thing that you can actually learn without the lecture notes itself. So, this is obviously dependent on like other things, like your tone, your language. If the patient is speaking Malay, you can't speak English because it will be like chicken and a duck talking. Nothing will happen, no communication will happen. And also your speaking style, body language, and even the clothing that you wear is actually very important when it comes to communication, which was actually not taught in our lecture notes. And I didn't even think about this until I went for my community placement, which just to share with you guys, we had a client who came for muscle gain. I remember the local preceptor asking me, why do you think I wore this shirt today? And I was just thinking like, is it because, like you don't want to be too formal? You don't want to be too formal so that the client don't feel pressured? But actually, like, it's because this shirt kind of shows off my muscle, and that in itself kind of motivates the client, stick to the diet itself. So I was like, oh, I didn't think of that. And these are like little things that I've learned. I think my placement itself that I actually really did not learn from my lecture notes. And also
small things.
Yep, that little small things. And also I think other stuff, communicating with like your colleagues, other healthcare professionals, different people, you kind of have to adapt your communication style differently to kind of suit each party. So you can't learn it from lecture notes. It's something that you have to develop on the go. It's good to just begin like with a standard way of communicating, and then as you gauge that person itself, sometimes certain people, they're more closed off, then you can't be overly friendly because they'll be like, whoa, back off, yo. But if they are like, they're pretty okay with that, then by all means, be happy, go for it. And whatever you need to make the other person feel comfortable and to make the communication itself effective, do it.
Yeah, it is not easy to expose ourselves to all these soft skills from the lecture. Need to practice through observing when we're doing in a group work, or just like you mentioned, when you're in placement, you see a lot of different things, different perspective from different community. Because we're in the DN batch, we are friends is all like DN, they got this kind of knowledge. But when we're exposed to kitchen, and it's totally different. Just
Yep.
like you mentioned, they got secondary school, maybe their education is so different. So the way they speak and the way you know the body language, all those things, we need to learn, and you slowly get well on all these kind of aspect.
Yeah, actually, placement is so important. It really
Yep.
helps you gauge the real life situation.
People always say like uni is the best time of your life. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I think I partially agree with this statement. I feel like both high school and uni kind of provide a different um sense of like that best time of your life. And this has a lot of things to do with the sense of freedom itself. Because when we talk about, when you're in high school, you feel like, oh, the teachers are always nagging me about like, my schoolwork, this and that. I kind of want to have that freedom of not having someone tell me what to do. So, when you come to uni, you realize you have that independence to do things at your own volition. But for me, I would say there's a different sense of or idea of freedom when it comes to high school and university. For high school, less responsibilities. I don't need to care about so many things, but people are always telling me what to do. But when you come to uni, I have a lot more things to care about. My responsibilities for like family, like soon to be career and things like that. But I'm more independent. So I would say it can be the best time of your life, but if you're like me and maybe you are sort of stuck in that kind of like, oh, I kind of want to go back to high school because it's simpler, times are simpler, I don't have to know all these things, I don't have to worry about like my income and things like that. I think it's important to shift your perspective and understand the need to move forward and to grow up. Some of us, we may be very stuck in the past and we feel like, oh, I don't want to grow up, I don't want to have to be an adult and do all these things, which is definitely a valid feeling, a valid point of view. All of us, we experience that. But at the end of the day, I think instead of really dwelling on the past, on what we could hold on to, maybe it's also important to enjoy the moment and, enjoy all the bad things and good things that happen, because the bad things, essentially, they help you learn a lot. And the good things are things that really help you carry through those bad times that you will or you have experienced.
Yeah, I agree. Like we can't go back to the past, so even though how much you want to, you can't. So just make the most out of your moment,
Yep.
your current
So
moment.
right now moment, yes.
Yeah, right
Yes.
now moment. So since you're in your fourth and final year of a dietetic student, did you enjoy the past 4 years of uni?
I think I definitely enjoy myself. I would say, my answer to the question would be a yes. I got to really expand and like shift my perspective on like the career field itself, because I really used to think like, when I started dietetics, and this is a misconception that I think even the general public has with dietitians, is that, oh, you just tell people what to eat. And I used to think that's what we do, telling people what to eat, but just with more like knowledge and scientific background.
Qualifications.
Yep. But I also understood that it's more complex than just telling people what to eat, because if you realize, like a normal person, you can just go Google and then like you take an article and be like, oh, I'll just tell you what to eat, just eat this lah. But then for us dietitians, we care about so many more things than just what you can find on Google. We ask patients about like what you like, how your lifestyle is, and we try to tailor everything to the patient. So I think I enjoy that shift of perspective, because it really kind of opened my mind, and it really helped me, I guess, accomplish that one goal I had, which was to really like my career, because I know like, hey, I'm special as a dietitian in some kind of way. Maybe people don't understand, but I understand and I'm here to help people with it. And I would also say I'm very grateful to a lot of people I've met like throughout these 4 years. From like my friends, from like colleagues, people I've worked with on events, even lecturers itself, I think they really helped me grow. They really accepted me, like, and all the mistakes I've made, and really helped me improve myself to be essentially a better person and also hopefully a better dietitian.
Yeah, it was definitely an amazing journey for you. And all the years you have gone through will become the fruitful memories and unforgettable experience in your uni life. And I think we are pretty much covering everything we're going to ask. Okay, now that we have come to an end, so let's get things spicy and allow me to ask some burning questions. So, what's your biggest regret in uni? And if you could redo uni all over again, what would you do it differently?
Well, I mean, like for me, I'm a person that likes to sort of live life with no regrets. Like, oh, if something bad happens, I'll be like, you know what? It's meant to happen, that kind of like mindset. But I think the only one regret I have with uni is that I always assumed that I had more time to do things, like whether it's like hanging out with people or just joining more events. But, with COVID lockdown, that kind of like reduced a lot of the opportunity to do so because a lot of things were done online. And I think when things are done online, a lot of components or a lot of part of doing things physically are no longer there. So previously, when I did events in IMU itself, after we're done, we go mama and we hang out. But when it comes to like online events, when you're done, you switch off, you leave the meeting, and then it's done. Oh, that's it. Like there's no like post gratification that you get from the event itself. And even by the time that lockdown, like now, it has essentially lifted up a bit to where like physical events are permitted but with like restrictions. I've already entered my final year and it's at that point where I don't have much time to really do a lot of these things and really like meet all the people that I want to meet. So I would say if I could redo uni, I mean, like it's hard to say like COVID happened. It's not something that's within my control, but maybe if I could redo uni, maybe like be a little bit more out there like the first few years before COVID happened, just so that I really could get to know a little bit more people and really try to get that sense of like accomplishment that you get after like you finish uni.
Yeah, I agree. COVID definitely made me realize like, wow, I'm not living life, I'm like spending my 20s at home. What am I doing? Yeah, but it's just something we have to accept, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
and just enjoy the things that we couldn't have done if it wasn't for COVID.
Yeah.
So before we wrap everything up, do you have any words you want to say to our fellow DNT students and perhaps anyone that's interested in studying dietetics in the future?
Well, I would say like every other course, it's not an easy journey. There will be many instances, like I've mentioned before, where you are challenged and you're really pushed to your limits. So I think with that, it's always good to take a step back and just kind of see the bigger picture, like one bad day is not going to ruin your whole course or anything. One bad grade is not going to ruin your whole CGPA or anything. So, if you are having those days where you feel kind of down in the dumps, maybe take some time to kind of recollect yourself and reflect on, why you decided to pursue your course in the first place. So for me, sometimes I'll think like, oh, so hard. I don't want to do this. Kind of want to yeet and just kind of give up. But then I remember like why I started in the first place, because I wanted to help people. And I feel like if I give up now, I will not be able to sort of do what I set out to do. And, I also try to think of how far I've come from not knowing anything to like being where I am today. And this is something that I do very often, which is I tell myself, if I can survive SPM, which was one of the most horrible times of my life, I'm pretty sure I can do this as well. I would tell myself, remember those times where you feel like you're going to cry after your Sejarah paper because you feel like you failed and you didn't? Well, maybe you're not going to fail this time also. So those are just some reassurance I tell myself. And at the end of the day, really be appreciative of everything that you've learned, all the growth process that you've gone throughout the years, whether you're just like starting off or whether you're like coming to like the latter semesters, like where I am right now. So I think this kind of just helps you see that your problems are not that big. It's valid that you see them as a problem, but maybe in like your whole life, that's just like one dot that's there. It's not gonna take up the whole thing. And you look back at it at the end of like 10 years later and be like, haha, I was dumb for being stressful then. Why did I think this was a problem then? Those kind of things. So I think ultimately, enjoy your learning experience and make the best out of it. And if you ever hit any bumps along the way, remember you will always have someone to help you there, whether it's your friend, your lecturers, or even people you don't know, strangers, sometimes strangers can even help you a lot. So I think just to end is, have fun, enjoy yourself. And if you guys need help, obviously us seniors, we're here. We may not be very free to reply you, but we are definitely helpful and we will try our best to kind of aid you along the way as well.
So here is the end of today's episode. And once again, thanks to Kah Yen here to be the special guest for this podcast, and we really learned a lot from you. Hopefully by the end of this episode, you guys have learned more about what dietetics students do in their research year and placement year, probably get some tips and mentally prepare for the upcoming challenges.
Yes, thank you so much, Kah Yen, for sharing so many valuable tips with us today. And before signing off, do check us out on our Instagram at insa.imu, which is indsa.imu, and our podcast at Insa Podcast.
And also do check out on Kah Yen Kickstart Aspiration Instagram account NutriTegi, NUTRI.TEGY. This is Insa Podcast, inspiring everyone to choose the food that brings a good unquestion.
I'm Emin. Stay tuned for the future episode. Bye!